Chapter 3399. Look, Bailey Hongzhuang is here. She's the one who poisoned them. She really is a peerless beauty. Her beauty is simply stunning. I'm afraid there's going to be a show to watch now. These guys' strength has been declining recently. No matter if it's the doctors or pharmacists, they all said that there's no way to cure them. Now they're placing all their hopes on Bailey Hongzhuang. In my opinion, these people shouldn't have any hope at all. They seriously injured Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and almost killed them. Bailey Hongzhuang only handed over the antidote because of Master Long and Master Yi. As for helping them recover their strength, that's just a pipe dream. Some of the disciples who had just returned began to discuss. Now that the main character had finally come out, the people whose strength had declined must be filled with anticipation. However, if they were in Bailey Hongzhuang's shoes, they would definitely not help the other party to recover their strength. Helping your enemy, isn't there something wrong with your brain? Di Beichen and the other two opened the door when they heard the commotion outside. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang, the four of them smiled at each other. Have you all fully recovered from your injuries? Bailey Hongzhuang asked with a smile. Di Beichen nodded, I'm fine now. We're fine too. After resting for so many days, I can't help but want to move my arms and legs. Shangguan Yingying joked. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled, it seems that the battle half a month ago wasn't enough for you. Shangguan Yingying shook her head, forget it, I don't want to experience that kind of thing again. She believed that no one would want to experience that kind of exhaustion and despair again. If not for the fact that Hongzhuang was a poison master, they would have really lost their lives here. Until they perished, Master Long and Master Yi probably wouldn't even feel the fluctuation of elemental energy. It was truly terrifying. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three came out, Long Yanwei immediately received the news and rushed over. When he saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were in high spirits and that their complexions had recovered their rosy complexions, Long Yanwei also revealed a joyful smile. It seems that you all have recovered quite well. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three nodded in unison, replying, thanks to Master Long's care, we have already recovered. That's good. Long Yanwei nodded. I almost thought that the three contracted beasts that were just sent out were gone. Hearing the joking tone in Long Yanwei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but chuckle. This is really dangerous. Wasting 3 demon pet eggs, this is too much of a waste of natural resources. Wen Xiren sighed. It wasn't easy for him to have his own contracted beast, and they had only been together for a short hour before they had to lose their lives together. That was too tragic. This matter has truly exceeded my expectations. However, the performance of the four of you is equally outstanding. It has greatly surprised me. Long Yanwei sighed in his heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were actually able to survive under such circumstances. He really didn't know if he should say that they had extraordinary abilities or that they were lucky. This kind of news, even if it was spread, no one would believe it. Chapter 3400. We still have to use our strength to prove that your eyesight is not bad. How can we die so easily? Wouldn't that turn Lord Long into a joke? Wen Xiren blinked his eyes and said in a teasing manner. Looking at Wen Xiren's appearance, Long Yanwei could not help but laugh. He realized that within Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4, Wen Xiren was the most active. He did not care about joking at all. In that case, I have to thank you all. When Xiren waved his hand, I can't say that I'm thankful. No matter what, we took advantage of you. Seeing that when Xiren was actually climbing up the pole like this, Long Yanwei helplessly shook his head, you slippery brat, if I had known earlier that you would be like this, I would have confiscated your demon pet egg. Master Long, you can't be like this. When Xiren's face fell, but he quickly smiled again, but now, I've already completed the contract, hee. You stinking brat. Long Yanwei knew Xiren's shameless personality, so he was too lazy to say anything more. Instead, he turned his gaze to Bailey Hongzhuang, which was his original purpose for coming here. Bailey Hongzhuang, I have something to ask you. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and said, Master Long, what do you want to ask? We've already given the antidote to those cultivators according to the detoxification method you mentioned. Now, their poison has indeed been detoxified. However, their cultivation levels have decreased to different degrees. I want to ask if you have any ideas on how to solve this problem. Why did such a situation happen to them? When Long Yanwei asked, the gazes of many cultivators around them landed on them. Almost all the cultivators whose cultivation had decreased had already run out of the house. Their burning gazes were directed at Bailey Hongzhuang. They only wanted to know Bailey Hongzhuang's answer. The decrease in cultivation was the most unacceptable thing for them. It would take a long time for them to recover their lost cultivation. This meant that their advantage would be greatly reduced, and their combat strength would be greatly reduced. This was especially true for those cultivators who wanted to pass the test to become inner hall disciples. If they still had some hope before, now that their cultivation had declined, they had no hope at all. The assessment was already very difficult to pass. Now that their cultivation had dropped, it meant that they could only obediently leave Penglai Palace when the time was up. There was no possibility of them ever coming back. This was too depressing. They knew very well that if they came to ask Bailey Hongzhuang would not help them. After all, they had wanted to take the lives of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Hence, they could only place their hopes on Lord Long. Lord Long had a very close relationship with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. It was because of Lord Long that Bailey Hongzhuang would hand over the antidote formula. Chapter 3401. Long Yanwei did not completely believe Bailey Hongzhuang's answer because Bailey Hongzhuang must have a deep hatred for those cultivators. Hence, it was normal for her to be unwilling to reveal the method to improve their condition. In other words, any cultivator would have made the same choice as Bailey Hongzhuang. However, the implications of the current situation were too great. Only by revealing the method to Bailey Hongzhuang would they be able to reduce their losses. I know that these people wanted to take your lives before, so it's normal that you don't want to tell them the solution. However, based on the current situation, if they can improve their situation, their influence will be reduced a little. This incident has caused quite a stir. I'm afraid that the palace master will be shocked when he returns. Long Yanwei slowly spoke. Long Yanwei didn't say the rest of his words. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang already understood what he meant. Di Beichen and the other two's eyes fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. They had only just found out about the fact that the outer palace disciples' cultivation levels had decreased. Regardless of what decision Bailey Hongzhuang made, they would definitely support her. Lord Long, it's not that I'm unwilling to reveal the method. Since I've already revealed the method to detoxify the poison, what's there that I can't reveal about the decrease in my cultivation level? However, I really don't have any other way. Bailey Hongzhuang spread her hands. Her expression was calm and her pitch-black phoenix-like eyes did not have the slightest ripple in them. If it weren't for the fact that we had been forced to the point where we had no other choice, I would never have used such a method because I know that the poison's influence is very great. Unfortunately, no one had any intention of letting us go at that time, so I had no choice but to use this method. This poison can stimulate a cultivator's battle power to an unprecedented level. However, I'm sure that you're aware of the effects of overdraft. Most of the time, there will be a certain side effect. The decrease in one's cultivation level is one of the side effects. At that time, the more violent the attack, the faster the flow of the yuan power in the cultivator's body, the greater the decrease in their cultivation level. Similarly, if the cultivator had not attacked at that time and the yuan power in the cultivator's body remained in a stable state, their cultivation level would not have decreased. At the end of the day, you've only reaped what you sowed. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at the crowd outside who had pricked up their ears to listen to the news as a disdainful light flashed in her eyes. She reaped what she sowed. This saying was not wrong at all. When the crowd heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, their expressions instantly turned ugly. This means that they would never be able to recover their lost cultivation levels. However, Bailey Hongzhuang gave such a reason, so they could only swallow this bitter water into their own stomachs. Who told them to be so impatient to take the lives of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others? What else could they say now that they had ended up like this? Long Yanwei was shocked when he heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's poison would be so effective. It really shocked him. However, when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's calm and unwavering eyes, Long Yanwei knew that everything that Bailey Hongzhuang had said was the truth. At this point, there was no turning back for this matter. Chapter 3402. Lord Long, I'll have to trouble you. Bailey Hongzhuang cupped her hands in greeting. Her pretty face revealed a hint of cruelty. I didn't want to cause you any trouble. Long Yanwei waved his hand. I can't blame you for this. If you want to get to the bottom of it, I was the one who started this. As he spoke, Long Yanwei glanced at Di Beichen and the other two, then continued, you guys should focus on your cultivation. You don't have to worry about this matter. I'll take care of it. Thank you, Lord Long. The four of them bowed to Long Yanwei. Only then did Long Yanwei turn around and leave. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's gazes turned towards the gazes that were focused on them downstairs. Compared to the provocative and dismissive gazes from before, everyone's gazes were now filled with fear. Especially those cultivators who had managed to escape with their lives. Facing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' gazes, they all felt a little guilty. As soon as their gazes met, they all retracted their gazes. Their original arrogance and disdain had completely disappeared. They had so many people against 4 people, yet they still ended up in such a state. If word got out, it would really be a joke. Seeing the crowd's gazes, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others felt a wave of satisfaction. Although the previous battle was extremely tragic, they were still very satisfied with the outcome before their eyes. At the very least, these fellows no longer dared to be as arrogant as before. Those foul words had also stopped. Hongzhuang, I never thought that your poison would have such an effect. Originally, I was a little unwilling to let them go just like that. Now that I know this, my heart feels much better. Shengguan Yingying's eyes rippled with excitement. Those fellows all wanted their lives. If they were to be safe and sound, she would not be happy. Although the consequences of a drop in cultivation were not as bad as death, it would still make them feel uncomfortable for a while. When Xiren also gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up, when it comes to poison techniques, I only admire you. Every time Hongzhuang took out a poison, it had an amazing effect. She was always able to save them from their predicament. He was really convinced. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Fortunately, I like to study these things on a daily basis. Otherwise, with the previous situation, we would really be finished. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the crowd's eyes involuntarily sunk. Those fellows had actually thought of concealing yuan power undulations. What a good plan. Just a little more, and the other party would have succeeded. Hongzhuang, I'm very supportive of your research on poison. I feel that it's much easier than cultivation. Shengguan Yingying's face was filled with a joyful smile. I feel like I'm starting to get interested in this poison technique. In the past, I didn't think much of it. I thought that once a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, this poison technique wouldn't be able to harm them. However, ever since I met you, I've changed my view of poison techniques. If I can use poison, I feel that it'll be a great killing weapon. Looking at Shengguan Yingying's excited look, Xiren couldn't help but pat her head and said, Yingying, with your character, I think it's better to forget about it. Otherwise, if you throw out a handful of poison without saying a word, I think everyone in front of us will be poisoned to death by you. Chapter 3403. In such a situation, using poison was much easier than fighting. With Shangguan Yingying's temper, there was no end to the people she would offend. Isn't this good? This way, we can save a lot of trouble. Shangguan Yingying's eyes lit up. She completely disagreed with Xiren's words. When Xiren sighed. It has indeed reduced a lot of trouble in a short period of time, but if those guys are like Gao Hanxia and Gao Hanxiu and have an elder brother or other relatives behind them, then wouldn't it be endless trouble? Shangguan Yingying was stunned. Thinking of the trouble Gao Hanchun brought to them, she sighed in her heart. If they had simply killed Gao Hanxiu and Shangguan Yingying, their journey to Penglai Island should have been very smooth. However, they had to hide like stray dogs. This feeling was really uncomfortable. Xiren, that's not right either. Di Beichen smiled faintly. If Gao Hanchun hadn't brought us all kinds of trouble, how could we have joined Penglai Palace? It would have been even more impossible to have our own contract beast. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. So, whether this is a blessing or a curse, it's hard to tell in a short time. We can be considered to have hit the jackpot, but we have found a good way out. At present, they did not have any sense of belonging to Penglai Palace, but they were really grateful to Master Long. Yes, maybe I can find more good luck. Shangguan Yingying chuckled. Yingying, if you are interested in poison, I can teach you. However, it is more troublesome to learn. You have to have a certain amount of patience. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into a faint smile. No matter what you learned, it was not easy to learn. However, as long as you persevered, you would eventually get a good harvest. They all focused their energy on cultivation, but if they could learn some side jobs, sometimes they could achieve unexpected results. Speaking of which, although the side jobs she learned seemed to be of little use, once they were used, they could be of great help to them. If Di Beichen and the other two were interested in developing side jobs, this was a good choice. Hongzhuang, do you support me too? Shangguan Yingying asked excitedly. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Of course. It's good to have one more ability. That's great. I want to start learning from you. Shangguan Yingying's eyes sparkled as she looked at Xiren provocatively. Did you see that? Hongzhuang and Beichen both support me. Looking at Shangguan Yingying's proud look, when Xiren couldn't help but laugh. Forget it, as long as you're happy. After Long Yanwei returned, he announced the answer given by Bailey Hongzhuang. Instantly, the group of cultivators whose powers had been reduced looked as if they had been sentenced to death. Their faces were extremely ugly. It's over. My cultivation base has fallen by 2 levels. It's simply impossible for me to pass the inner hall's test with this level of cultivation. My cultivation has regressed by 1 level. It wasn't easy for me to raise it up. Now that it's regressed, I'm afraid I'll return to being bullied by others. Chapter 3404. Cultivators who dropped a level were fine, but they would need to spend more than half a year to replenish their yuanli. The outer palace disciples of Penglai Palace could cultivate here for 5 years. As long as they didn't make a big mistake in these 5 years, they wouldn't be kicked out of Penglai Palace. If they lost a level of cultivation, they still had a chance to make up for it. But if they lost 3 levels of cultivation, it was completely impossible. In 5 years, they didn't even know if they could make up for the 3 levels of cultivation. If they wanted to pass the inner palace's assessment, it was completely impossible. Not only that, if his cultivation base fell below the 5th level of the Purple Realm, then Penglai Island would be filled with danger. Any random cultivator would be stronger than him. Other than being a coward and living in fear, there was no other way. Thinking back, they were still a very high-profile existence in this outer palace. Suddenly becoming so weak, no one could accept it. The most important thing was that they had offended a lot of cultivators. Now that their cultivation was weak, whether they could keep their lives was a problem. For a moment, everyone couldn't help but regret. They should have known that the person who was favored by Master Long and even gave out 3 demon pet eggs was definitely not an ordinary person. However, they didn't believe in evil. They forced themselves to such a state. It was truly a self-inflicted evil. After this incident, everyone no longer suspected that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had some shady business with Master Long. Because Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were real geniuses. Every disciple of Penglai Palace was a cultivation genius, but when all these geniuses gathered together, there was naturally a difference between geniuses and geniuses. There were many famous geniuses in Penglai Palace, but the newcomers who made such a terrifying scene, other than Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, there was no one else. While everyone was talking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had already gone to the ocean world to gain experience. Other people's views had nothing to do with them. They came here just to cultivate in peace and improve their own cultivation. Their bodies had just recovered, and it would take some time for them to completely recover their combat power. So going to the ocean world to gain experience was undoubtedly the best. This was because when they went to the Penglai Palace, not only did they have to face monsters, they also had to face troublesome cultivators. One had to know that the trouble brought by cultivators was much more than the trouble brought by demonic beasts. In the process of cultivation, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were also waiting for the news of the punishment. After this incident, they found out that the leader of Penglai Palace and some teachers were not in Penglai Palace. They could only make a decision after the leader returned. Therefore, they wanted to wait until the palace master returned to know the final decision. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had waited for a while, but the palace master had not returned. They felt rather helpless. We don't know when the palace master will return. Why don't we go to the training grounds first? Xiren frowned. Waiting like this was not a solution. Only after they had obtained a certain amount of merit points from the training grounds would it be most worthwhile for them to cultivate in the cultivation area. After all, cultivating in the cultivation area would yield twice the results with half the effort. This teleportation array is so big, I'm afraid it can teleport a very long distance, Di Beichen said slowly in a low voice. The distance of the teleportation was related to the scale of the teleportation array. The bigger the teleportation array, the more arrays were inscribed inside and the more stable it was. At the same time, it also proved that the distance was very far, so it needed to be so stable. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head lightly. The distance between the islands of Penglai Island is not close. This place is completely the training ground of Penglai Palace, so it must be farther. Chapter 3406. However, there are 2 teleportation arrays here. Which one should we enter? Shangguan Yingying looked at the 2 teleportation arrays in front of her in confusion. It was said that one of the 2 teleportation arrays teleported to the place where the inner hall disciples went, and the other teleported to the place where the outer hall disciples went. However, from the looks of it, there was no difference at all. Hearing this, Di Beichen also frowned. Indeed, there are no markings here. The 4 people walked around the 2 teleportation arrays and found that there were no markings at all. They could not see any difference. What should we do? Shangguan Yingying's face was a little embarrassed. It seems that we have no other way but to ask someone. Bailey Hongzhuang was also a little helpless. They didn't want to trouble anyone because they were too eye-catching now. Their every move would be noticed by others. Unfortunately, in the current situation, they had no other choice but to do this. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others suddenly saw a familiar figure. This person was none other than Li Shengkai, who had brought them to register. Seeing this figure, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but have their eyes lit up. They didn't know anyone in Penglai Palace. The only person they had dealt with was Li Xingkai. At this moment, Li Xingkai was walking over with a group of cultivators. Obviously, they were also preparing to go to the training place in a team. Most of the disciples of Penglai Palace were recruited alone, and there was a certain danger in going to the training place. Therefore, everyone would find some like-minded disciples to form a team. This way, their safety would undoubtedly be a little more guaranteed. Most of such teams had 5 or 6 people on the small side, and a dozen or even dozens of people on the large side. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others should be considered the smallest team. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others noticed Li Xingkai also saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. He couldn't help but panic. He knew very well that he was the only one who had dealt with Bailey Hongzhuang and others in the entire outer hall of Penglai. Originally, he was a little dissatisfied with the stinginess of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. When everyone asked him about Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, he was also a little resentful and didn't speak very politely. Afterwards, after knowing that everyone was preparing to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, he didn't go and remind them. In fact, he himself also wanted to get some benefits. If he could get the demon pet egg, that would be a really lucky thing. However, he couldn't help but feel a little worried that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were valued so highly by Master Long. Moreover, at that time, it was Master Long who asked him to bring Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to report. If he were to participate, he was afraid that the punishment he would receive would be more severe than anyone else, so he had not made a move. He only wanted to wait for everyone to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 before joining in the fight for the demon pet eggs. However, this final result was obviously beyond everyone's expectations. At the same time, it also made him feel lucky. Fortunately, he didn't make a move at that time. Otherwise, he would have dropped a level like those guys. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were very happy after seeing Li Xingkai. Li Xingkai wasn't among the people who attacked them last time, so their impression of Li Xingkai was still very good. Chapter 3407. Senior brother Li Shengguanying had a bright smile on her face. Are you guys forming a team to go to the training ground? Seeing that Shengguanying didn't seem to hold any grudges, Li Xingkai felt a little awkward. However, a smile soon appeared on his face. Yes, are you guys going to the training ground too? Shengguanying smiled and nodded. We haven't been to the training ground yet, so we want to take this opportunity to see it. Since we've already met, why don't we go together? Hearing this, Li Xingkai was startled. He then looked at the cultivators beside him. There were too many cultivators during the battle. He was afraid that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 wouldn't be able to remember clearly. However, there were still people in his team who had dropped levels because of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Not only did these people's strength drop, but they were also punished by Master Long. It could be said that they didn't have a good time during this period of time. Therefore, they decided to go to the training ground today to obtain merit points. Their cultivation had dropped too much. They could only hope to work hard to recover their cultivation in the cultivation area. The longer this delay, the worse it would be for them. However, none of them expected to meet Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 here. He could already feel the anger and killing intent faintly gathering from some of the cultivators in the team. Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen, and Wen Ziren also had faint smiles on their faces. However, after noticing Li Xingkai's somewhat awkward expression, they also keenly noticed that several people in Li Xingkai's team were clearly looking at them with some hostility. Although they weren't sure if their judgment was right, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 were already a little vigilant in their hearts. In the outer hall, they had made many enemies. Junior sister Shengguan, we already have a lot of people here. In my opinion, we should teleport separately. Li Xingkai slowly said. At this point, he did not want to fall out with Shengguanying and the others. However, his team had already trained together many times, and he was in an awkward position between the two. Shangguan Yingying did not mind Li Shinkai's words. She immediately nodded and said, "Senior brotherly, it's our first time heading to the training grounds. However, may I know which teleportation formation we Outer Palace disciples will be heading to?" After Shangguan Yingying said that, another cultivator pointed at one of the teleportation formations and said, "The teleportation formation on the left." "Li Shinkai, am I right?" Li Shinkai was startled. Looking at the teleportation array the man was pointing at, a complicated look flashed in his eyes. However, after noticing the man's threatening gaze, he still nodded. "I see." Shangguan Yingying smiled faintly. "Thank you." "Li Shinkai, I just remembered that I left something at my place and forgot to bring it." "Why don't we set off later?" the cultivator said. "Oh." Only then did Shangguan Yingying return to Beili Hongzhuang and the other two. She pointed at the teleportation formation on the left and said, "Li Shinkai said the teleportation formation on the left." Hearing this, Beili Hongzhuang and the other two couldn't help but look at each other with a complicated expression. Could there be a problem? I keep feeling that Li Shinkai's expression is a little strange, and the cultivators in his team seem to be hostile to us. Di Beichen said in a deep voice. Chapter 3408. I don't think so, right? Xiren frowned. Li Shinkai's expression was very strange when he left last time. Until now, I still can't figure out the reason for his expression. Maybe he's just like that. In our current situation, ordinary cultivators shouldn't take the initiative to cause trouble for us, right? Shangguan Yingying looked puzzled. As soon as we enter, Li Shinkai's lie will be exposed. Would he do such a stupid thing? For a moment, Beili Hongzhuang and the other three had complicated expressions on their faces. They could not make up their minds. Li Shinkai won't gain anything by offending us. Beili Hongzhuang nodded. Then, should we believe him this time? Di Beichen's face darkened slightly. All kinds of possibilities kept flashing through his mind. If the other party was not Li Shinkai but another disciple, he would definitely choose to enter another teleportation formation with such a strange behavior. However, Li Shinkai was the cultivator assigned by Long Yanwei to bring them in. He really could not think of a reason why Li Shinkai would lie to them. Forget it. Let's go and take a look. If something is wrong, we'll just come back, Beili Hongzhuang said in a deep voice. Li Shinkai was also very conflicted at this moment. He could not help but frown and look at the cultivator beside him. Why did you lie to them like this? Once they know the truth, we'll be in trouble. You've already suffered a loss at their hands. Don't tell me you want to suffer a loss again. Li Shinkai's expression was ugly. If possible, he really did not want to provoke Beili Hongzhuang and the other three. The growth of these four people had shown an uncontrollable trend. As long as they continued to develop, their future development would definitely be limitless. Offending these cultivators with limitless prospects would not benefit them at all. Once they were targeted, it would put them in a difficult situation. I admit that their talent and combat strength are very strong, but I won't be happy if I don't vent my anger. I'm sure you've heard about the training grounds of the inner hall. As long as they go, they will never come back alive. This Beili Hongzhuang's poison technique is indeed powerful, but their poison is completely useless. The man's lips curled into a cold smile, and the light in his eyes was extremely vicious. His cultivation had already reached the 7th level of the Purple Realm, and he wasn't far from breaking through to the 8th level of the Purple Realm. He had already made up his mind. As soon as he broke through to the 8th level of the Purple Realm, he would participate in the advancement test. Once he became an Inner Palace disciple, his future would be limitless. However, his cultivation had actually dropped from the 7th level of the Purple Realm to the 6th level of the Purple Realm, and this was because he had not made a move before. Otherwise, he might have already dropped to the 5th level of the Purple Realm. Originally, he thought that he had a high chance of passing the advancement test. But now, his hopes were almost completely gone. How could he be happy? Now that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had come to ask them such a question, in his opinion, this was a chance given to him by God for revenge. If he didn't seize it, it would be a waste. Only when they were dead could he breathe a sigh of relief. Chapter 3409. Looking at Li Shinkai's frightened look, the man's eyes flashed with displeasure. If you are so afraid of them, then you can tell them the truth now, but I don't know if they will believe me or not. The man looked at Li Shinkai with increasingly cold eyes. If they don't kill me, then I promise you will die miserably in my hands. Hearing the murderous intent in the man's words, Li Shinkai couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This man had always been the leader of their team. Even if the man's cultivation had declined compared to before, his combat power was still stronger than his. Most importantly, he knew that the man was absolutely telling the truth. Once he told the truth to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, this man would definitely attack him. Unless he told Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and then asked them for help, he would be safe only if this man died. However, would Bailey Hongzhuang and the others help him? Thinking of this, Li Shinkai did not have enough confidence in his heart. After all, he had only dealt with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others might not believe what he said. It was better to avoid trouble. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were already in trouble because of the previous incident. Presumably, they would not do anything for him. After thinking about it, Li Shinkai finally gave up the plan in his heart. Compared to this possibility, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were more likely not to return. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the others died, then all of this would naturally have nothing to do with him. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally decided to believe Li Shinkai. After seeing that Li Shinkai and the others had no intention of leaving, they did not continue to delay and directly opened the teleportation formation. After watching Bailey Hongzhuang and the others open the teleportation formation, several cultivators in Li Shinkai's team showed gloating smiles on their faces. The Outer Palace disciples had entered the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. This kind of thing had happened before in the history of Penglai Palace. It was just that in the end, they never returned. The reason why the Penglai Palace's advancement test was so difficult was related to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. If one did not possess such strength, entering the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples would only result in death. It was said that the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples were much more dangerous than the training grounds of the Outer Palace disciples. The reason why it was difficult for the number of Inner Palace disciples to increase was because the training grounds were too dangerous. The slightest carelessness would cause one to lose one's life. Even the Inner Palace disciples had a high mortality rate when they went there, not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 newcomers who had just joined the Penglai Palace. Compared to the gloating crowd, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were completely unaware of the dangers of the place they were heading to. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others walked out of the teleportation array, they saw that they were surrounded by a forest. A rotten smell spread in the air, causing them to frown. Aren't we supposed to appear in a sea? Why does the environment here look so special? Shangguan Yingying frowned and looked around. She felt that the environment was completely different from what she had imagined. Chapter 34:10. At a glance, the surrounding environment gave Bailey Hongzhuang and the others an extremely unfamiliar feeling. They had been to many places over the years, but this was the first time they had seen such an environment. There was an indescribable dark aura and a sense of discomfort, as if there was an inexplicable coldness drilling into their bodies. The 4 of them slowly walked down from the teleportation array and stood on the spot, looking at their surroundings. For some reason, they gradually had a bad feeling in their hearts. I don't think we're on an island, Ziren said slowly. Di Beichen nodded, and a heavy expression appeared on his extraordinarily handsome face. This is indeed not an island. There's no smell of the sea breeze here at all. The air is not humid. On the contrary, it smells rotten and dead. I'm afraid we've come to the wrong place. As Di Beichen's voice fell, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but change. This was not good news. So, Li Shengkai lied to us. Shangguan Yingying raised her voice filled with disbelief. That should be the case, Di Beichen replied. Shangguan Yingying frowned. But why would he lie to us? What good would it do him? I'm afraid it's the doing of the other disciples in his team. After all, Li Shengkai didn't answer your question first. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was slightly heavy. Although she had some doubts before, she felt that Li Shengkai had no reason to lie to them. This was because this was a lie that could be easily exposed. As long as they came, they would know that they had fallen into a trap. When they returned, it would definitely be troublesome. Hearing this, Shangguan Yingying recalled the previous scene, and her face could not help but turn ugly. That's true. So, the guys in Li Shengkai's team want to harm us? I didn't expect this guy to be so despicable. When I return, I must teach them a lesson. Shangguan Yingying's face was full of anger. She had regarded Li Shengkai as a friend, but she did not expect him to treat them like this. In my opinion, this matter is not as simple as it seems. Di Beichen said slowly, his deep eyes flashing with a thoughtful light. They know that this is a lie that can be easily exposed, but they still decided to do it. Why do you think? As soon as he said this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Ziren couldn't help but look at each other. They all understood what Di Beichen meant. You mean, they have the confidence to keep us here forever? Ziren asked. Di Beichen nodded. If that's not the case, their actions are a bit too stupid. No way. Shangguan Yingying found it hard to believe. Then why don't we just go back through the teleportation array? Let's give it a try. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes darkened slightly. She immediately walked into the teleportation array again. She also felt that this matter was a little strange. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, Di Beichen and the other two also walked into the teleportation array. As long as they could be teleported back, it meant that there was no problem. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three tried to go back, they found that the teleportation array showed no signs of being activated at all. Chapter 34:11. What's going on? Why isn't there any movement from the teleportation array? Shangguan Yingying, who was extremely angry before, couldn't help but panic after seeing this scene. When they came, the teleportation array was still fine. Why wasn't it working when they went back? Could it be that there's something wrong with the teleportation array? We can only come here but not go back. If that's the case, doesn't that mean we have to stay here forever? But we don't even know where this place is. How are we going to go back? For a moment, thousands of thoughts ran through Shangguan Yingying's mind. Countless thoughts appeared in her mind. If they could only stay here, it would be terrible. Listening to Shangguan Yingying's series of questions, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others felt a headache coming on. This problem was really beyond their expectations. Yingying, don't worry. Let's think about the problem first. Ziren held Shangguan Yingying's hand and calmed her nervous emotions. Shangguan Yingying glanced at Ziren. Her originally nervous emotions calmed down a little. She was really too anxious just now. If there was really something wrong with the teleportation array, it would be a bolt from the blue for them. No one knew where they were teleported to. If they wanted to go back, they wouldn't be able to tell the direction at all. It was tantamount to a dead end. Di Beichen and Ziren carefully inspected the teleportation array. Both of their faces were somewhat heavy. After a moment, Di Beichen and Xiren raised their heads. Their eyes flashed with doubts. There's something wrong with this teleportation array. Di Beichen slowly said. What's the problem? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. She didn't know much about teleportation arrays, so she couldn't determine what the problem was. This teleportation array is a little different from the one we used to come here. The one we used to come here could be used at any time, but this one doesn't seem to be able to be used at any time. It seems, there's a certain time limit. At this point, Di Beichen couldn't help but turn to Xiren. Xiren, what do you think? When Xiren nodded, although I haven't personally built a teleportation array before, when I hired people to build teleportation arrays in the past, I noticed that there are certain differences between teleportation arrays and other teleportation arrays. This teleportation array does seem to have a time limit, but I don't know how long it is. Di Beichen and Xiren looked at each other. Since the two of them had the same idea, it seemed that this matter was not far from the truth. Shangguan Yingying's eyes brightened. You mean the teleportation array isn't broken, but we can't go back for now? Not bad. Xiren replied, so you don't have to worry too much. We may have to stay here for a while, but it's not like we can't go back. That's good. Shangguan Yingying relaxed a little. As long as I don't have to be a savage here, it's fine. I don't want to wander here forever. After confirming all this, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't leave the range of the teleportation array. Instead, she sat down directly on the side. They had to sort out their thoughts and figure out what the whole thing meant. Chapter 34:12. Even so, their mortality rate in the training ground is not low. It can be seen that this place is not an ordinary place of danger. Bailey Hongzhuang's light and pleasant voice was somewhat heavy. This news was inadvertently heard by Xiao He and Xiao Bai from the other disciples. She did not expect them to come to the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples so early. She had never paid attention to it before. I don't think this place is a good place. There is something strange everywhere. Shangguan Yingying nodded. Those damn guys definitely want us to die here. A strong sense of helplessness appeared on Wen Xiren's face. I feel that since we came to this Penglai Palace, trouble comes one after another. It wasn't easy to solve the trouble last time, but I didn't expect to be tricked again. Next time, we must pay attention. Even if we are just asking for directions, we have to ask a few more. I don't believe that everyone is lying to us. Hearing Xiren's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others shook their heads with a smile. Speaking of which, their popularity in Penglai Palace was really bad. They did not have any friends in the first place. It was not easy to meet Li Shengkai, but they did not expect this guy to lie to them. Since these guys are so confident that it is impossible for us to go back if we stay here, it must be very dangerous here. Di Beichen put away his joking expression and a serious look appeared on his sharp face. We have to be careful here. If we are not careful, we may lose our lives. For now, we have to find the other Inner Palace disciples and get some relevant information from them. Only then can we understand more about this training ground. Bailey Hongzhuang said in a deep voice. Before they understood the situation here, they had to be careful. Xiren nodded. I understand. Although our reputation in the outer palace is not good, we have not offended the Inner Palace disciples. I believe there will be no problem. It's just, there is not a single shadow nearby. Shangguan Yingying frowned. So far, other than the movements of the four of them, there was no other movement. She had no idea where the disciples of the Inner Palace were. Di Beichen slowly stood up and looked ahead. His expression was calm. Since this teleportation array will only be activated after a certain period of time, it's naturally useless for Inner Palace disciples to come here now. Therefore, it's normal that there's no one here. Let's go outside and take a look. I believe that we will soon encounter other inner palace disciples. Following Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two also stood up. Right now, they could only take one step at a time. Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and White Lion had already come out of the chaos ring. Di Beichen and the other two's contract beasts were still very young, so they temporarily stayed in the chaos ring. This place was filled with danger, and it was not a good place for them. White Lion walked next to Bailey Hongzhuang. However, as soon as it came out, White Lion's eyes darkened. Master, this place is filled with a dark aura. There is no sign of life. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded gently. Indeed, this place is a little strange. It's my first time seeing such a lifeless place. Chapter 34:13. I say, isn't this place a little too strange? Shengguan Yingying's face was filled with disbelief. I can't even see a single plant. Could this be another place similar to the demonic abyss? The demonic abyss was also barren. There was nothing else on the entire island other than the demonic tower. Now that you mention it, I do feel that this place is rather similar. Xiren smiled faintly. However, this place doesn't have the slightest bit of blood qi. On the contrary, it's filled with the aura of death. Perhaps it's because too many people have died here. Bailey Hongzhuang was not as optimistic as Xiren because White Lion had just told her a piece of news. This news gave her an ominous feeling. Wife, what are you thinking about? Di Beichen noticed the change in Bailey Hongzhuang's expression and could not help but ask. White Lion told me that there are no demonic beasts' auras within 100 miles. Isn't this too strange? Bailey Hongzhuang lifted her eyes to look at Di Beichen. We should be heading to the training grounds to hunt demonic beasts. However, there are no demonic beasts here. So what are we doing here? Di Beichen was stunned when he heard this. His gaze then landed on White Lion. White Lion, are you sure? I'm sure. White Lion nodded his head. There is indeed no aura of demonic beasts around here. I feel that there are no other demonic beasts in this area. This environment is not suitable for demonic beasts to live in. Although White Lion's words were hard to understand, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest believed in his judgment. As a beast king, he understood demonic beasts the best. He could sense their auras in a wide range. Since White Lion had said so, there must be no demonic beasts nearby. That's strange. If there are no demonic beasts here, are we just here to stay? When Xiren was confused. They had planned to come here to obtain the essence gallbladders and exchange them for merit points so that they could cultivate in the cultivation area. Since there were no demonic beasts here, it meant that it was impossible to obtain essence gallbladders here. If so, what were the inner hall disciples doing here? The four of them looked at each other. No one could give a definite answer. This matter was really too strange. Little Black and Little White also jumped down from Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders at this moment. It was precisely because they didn't know why that they had a very bad feeling. Master, let's go ahead and take a look. Go. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three carefully walked forward. Although they didn't sense any movement in their surroundings, they were still very careful. In this unknown environment, anything could happen. After Xiao He and Xiao Bai left for a while, they quickly returned. Master, we saw some inner hall disciples in front. However, they all looked seriously injured. I'm afraid this place is really dangerous. Hearing Xiao He and Xiao Bai's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest's eyes lit up. As long as they could see other cultivators, they would at least know what was going on here. Where are they? Bailey Hongzhuang quickly asked. In this direction. Xiao He pointed ahead. Follow me and Xiao Bai. All right, lead the way. When Xiren pretended to be confused and looked at the people in front of him in confusion. Have we come to the wrong place? It seems that these four little fellows have been tricked. The woman shook her head. There was a hint of helplessness in her expression. However, the guys who tricked you guys are ruthless enough. Did you guys just join the Penglai Palace? Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three nodded in unison. We did just join the Penglai Palace. Chapter 34:15. Newcomers have actually been tricked into coming here. Looks like you're quite hated. The man in the lead chuckled. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ren Ziheng from the inner hall. This is my sister, Ren Zimei. Senior brother Ren, senior sister Ren. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three clasped their hands together. Ren Ziheng had given them a good impression, but they had already suffered at the hands of Li Xingkai once. As a result, they were not surprised by the enthusiasm of the two. Ren Zimei nodded. You should rest here for a while. This is a training ground for inner hall disciples. It's far too dangerous for you to be here with your cultivation, so it's best if you stay with us. Don't act alone, or you'll only lose your life. Do you understand? Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were enlightened by Ren Zimei's words of concern. Senior sister Ren, then can we go back directly? When Xiren asked. Since they had already acted like they did not know that they had been tricked, they naturally had to act until the end. Xiren was undoubtedly an expert at acting, so he took the opportunity to get more information from Ren Zimei and the others. Ren Zimei sighed when she saw that Xiren did not understand the situation at all. No, there's still half a month before the next teleportation formation activates. You won't be able to return during this time. Follow us during this time. We're still very safe here for now. Everyone is recuperating here. Once the teleportation formation activates, you can return with your injured seniors. Before you become inner hall disciples, don't come here again. Senior sister, may I ask what dangers there are here? Bailey Hongzhuang asked curiously. We didn't notice any movements along the way. There didn't seem to be any monster beasts. As the voice of Bailey Hongzhuang fell, the faces of the more than 20 inner palace disciples changed a bit, and their expressions were a bit complicated. Ren Zimei did not answer Bailey Hongzhuang. Instead, she turned to look at Ren Ziheng. Ren Ziheng pondered for a moment before he said, Outer Palace disciples aren't allowed to enter the training grounds of the Inner Palace, and the situation here isn't something that Outer Palace disciples can understand. However, since you are going to stay here for half a month, I'm afraid it's impossible for you not to know. Before I tell you, you have to promise not to tell anyone else about this place. Otherwise, once the news gets out, you will be severely punished. Believe me, this punishment is not something you can bear. Seeing the grave expressions of Ren Ziheng and the others, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were also somewhat complicated. They did not understand just how mysterious this training ground was. They had only tried to understand how serious the situation was. Senior brother Ren, don't worry. After we leave, we will definitely not mention a single word about this place. A sliver of seriousness appeared on Di Beichen's handsome face. His eyes shone with sincerity and steadiness. Although they did not know just what was so special about this place, since Ren Ziheng and the others were so serious, there must be a reason. As such, they just had to abide by it. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others nodded as well, indicating their sincerity. Chapter 34:16. It's because it's daytime right now, so you haven't come across any danger along the way. If it's nighttime, it's very likely that you'll lose your life just by walking the path you just took, Ren Ziheng smiled faintly. The expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but change when they heard that. They had only spent a quarter of an hour to get here from the teleportation formation. According to Ren Ziheng, they would lose their lives in such a short journey. Just how dangerous was this place? There are no monstrous beasts in this place at all. There are only contracted beasts of us cultivators. Every time Ren Ziheng said a word, the doubts in Bailey Hongzhuang's heart couldn't help but deepen. Bailey Hongzhuang lowered her head to look at Bai Shi. It seemed that everything was as Bai Shi had said. There really were no monstrous beasts here. The four of them stared at Ren Ziheng. They could not understand where the so-called danger came from since there were no monstrous beasts here. Here, our enemies are skeletons, Ren Ziheng said in a deep voice. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but be stunned when they heard that. They stared at Ren Ziheng in surprise, unable to wrap their heads around it. Skeletons. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her voice slightly, filled with surprise and confusion. There are skeletons here. Di Beichen and the others were also confused. This was the first time they had heard of skeletons. They had never heard of such things before. Ren Ziheng nodded. I know you're very surprised. When we first found out that the Inner Palace disciples were training in a place like this, we were also very surprised. However, there are indeed skeletons here. Moreover, there are countless skeletons here. These skeletons rest during the day and come out at night. As a result, the night is the most dangerous time. As skeletons, these fellows do not need to use their eyes to observe their surroundings. What they observe is the vitality of humans. On the other hand, it's much more difficult for us to deal with skeletons at night. Moreover, these skeletons are different from demon beasts. They are inanimate objects, so they can't feel any pain. Unless their spirits are extinguished, they will continue to fight. When Ren Ziheng said all this, Ren Zimei and the surrounding cultivators looked helpless. It was obvious that the skeleton had brought them a lot of trouble. Listening to Ren Ziheng's introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only felt that Ren Ziheng was telling them about a world that they had never understood before. Skeletons, they never thought that skeletons would have fighting strength, and they were not afraid of pain. They were simply abnormal existences. The other party was an inanimate object and did not fear death at all. On the contrary, cultivators like them were at a complete disadvantage. Senior brother Ren, I don't understand why there are skeletons here. When Xiren frowned. This was beyond his imagination. We've never heard of this before. Some cultivators' corpses contain some resentment or are buried in places where the aura of darkness is very dense. Gradually, they will turn into skeletons and possess a certain level of combat power. They will come out at night to cause trouble. Chapter 34:17. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three nodded their heads in understanding. They had already noticed the difference in this place the moment they arrived. The feeling of death and the dense dark aura made them feel an indescribable sense of oppression. Coupled with the rotten smell in the air, although they had not personally seen the skeletons that Ren Ziheng had mentioned, they had already believed it in their hearts. This place was indeed very suitable for skeletons to live. This place is indeed filled with an indescribable sense of strangeness. However, we don't understand why the Inner Palace disciples would want to train here. What are the benefits of fighting these skeletons? Rather than that, wouldn't it be better to deal with the demon beasts? Shengguan Yingying looked at Ren Ziheng curiously. Just entering this place made people feel very uncomfortable. When she thought about staying here for such a long time, she could not help but feel a chill down her spine. Although demon beasts were scary, they were still living beings. However, facing skeletons, just imagining that scene was somewhat unacceptable. The range of these skeletons' development is getting bigger and bigger. Not only will human cultivators become skeletons, but demon beasts will also become demon beast skeletons after death. You have not personally witnessed the destructive power of these skeletons, so you don't understand. If these skeletons are allowed to continue developing, this continent will very likely become the world of skeletons. Currently, all the major forces are thinking of ways to suppress the development of these skeletons. Therefore, everyone has a certain tacit understanding to not spread this news to avoid causing panic. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at each other in dismay. Their hearts were filled with shock. They never knew that such a terrifying existence as skeletons existed in the Xingxian continent. However, when they thought about how so many Purple Realm 7th level and above cultivators had suffered such serious injuries, if these skeletons were allowed to continue developing, then the situation would indeed be a little scary. Fortunately, this was Penglai Island. If these skeletons were to develop outside, then it would be a complete disaster. So, all the major forces are taking it as their responsibility to eliminate these skeletons? Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. That's right. Ren Ziheng said faintly. Originally, the Outer Palace disciples were not able to come into contact with this level, so naturally, they did not need to bear any responsibility. However, now that you have come into contact with this level ahead of time, dealing with skeleton has nothing to do with you for the time being. However, sealing off this information is also your responsibility. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Senior Brother Ren, I understand. Don't worry, we will definitely not spread this news. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had all understood why the strength of the Inner Palace disciples was so strong, but there were often casualties, and why the number of Inner Palace disciples could never grow. It turned out that there was such a secret in the Inner Palace. Compared to the Outer Palace disciples who only focused on their own cultivation, the Inner Palace disciples undoubtedly had an additional layer of responsibility. They also had an additional layer of protection around them. This kind of responsibility was not something that an ordinary person could bear. Immediately, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were filled with admiration for the Inner Palace disciples. In order to prevent these skeletons from affecting the ordinary people of the Xingxian continent, they were fighting with their lives on the line. Chapter 34:18. Seeing the admiration in the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, a faint smile appeared on Ren Ziheng's face. I've told you so much, but I don't see any fear on your faces. The place where we are now is a place where the frequency of skeletons is low, so everyone is healing here. The other disciples who are not injured are outside, waiting to kill the skeletons at night. The injured disciples will come here. Zimei and I will be responsible for protecting you, so it's relatively safe for you to stay here. Don't try to explore the dangerous places outside. When you become an Inner Palace disciple, this responsibility will automatically fall on you. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three nodded. We will work hard to become an inner disciple. Hearing this, Ren Zimei smiled faintly. I feel that you are very familiar with each other. I always feel that one day you will become an inner disciple of the Inner Palace. Although it's still a little far away, I believe that you will succeed in the future. At the same time, the other injured disciples also started to laugh. I also think that these guys have the potential to become Inner Palace disciples. After all, they had just joined the Outer Palace and were already tricked into coming here. It can be seen that they are extremely hated in the Outer Palace. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but look at each other. Their expressions were a little awkward. It had to be said that their popularity in the Outer Palace was a little too bad. At this time, Ren Ziheng laughed and scolded, come on, you were also very arrogant when you were in the Outer Palace. There were many people who wanted to teach you a lesson. Yes, that's why I feel that they have the potential to become inner disciples. If they are like those guys who pretend to be obedient, scheming everywhere, there is no meaning at all. Moreover, in my opinion, it is because they have the ability that they are schemed to be schemed against. Have you seen anyone who is not strong enough get schemed against? The man shrugged indifferently, as if he was not ashamed, but proud. Ren Ziheng shook his head helplessly. Come on, no matter what you say, you are right. So, is this also a compliment to us? Shangguan Yingying was startled. She originally thought that the man was mocking them, but after listening to the conversation between him and Ren Ziheng, it did not seem to be mocking them, but praising them. That's right, I am praising you. The inner disciples present also smiled and nodded. The originally gloomy atmosphere suddenly became cheerful. Ren Zimei chuckled. To be honest, none of the inner hall's disciples are peaceful people. Things like being cheated happen all the time. However, as long as they can endure it, their development will be equally astonishing. Geniuses were always somewhat out of tune with others. Because of their own excellence, there were people's faces. They had long been used to it. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were a little surprised by the situation in front of them. It seemed that they had found a group of their own here. Chapter 34:19. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. I think so too. They seem to be much more sincere than the outer hall disciples. Although she had only stayed here for a short period of time, she could feel the sincerity of the inner hall disciples in front of her. This was a completely different feeling from the outer hall disciples. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang, but Di Beichen and the others also felt the same. This kind of sincerity was something they could not feel at all in the outer hall. Is this also the difference between the inner hall disciples and the outer hall disciples? Xiao Bai wondered. I don't know. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head, but at least they don't have any malicious intent towards us. In their current situation, they were no threat to the inner hall disciples at all. The other side indeed had no need to deceive or harm them. Senior brother Ren, senior sister Ren, I feel that the atmosphere here is very different from the atmosphere among the outer hall disciples. Are you all good friends? Shangguan Yingying could not help but ask. She had always said what was on her mind, especially after seeing Ren Ziheng and the others joking with each other. She could not help but speak out her doubts. Listening to Shangguan Yingying's words, Ren Zimei could not help but laugh. Your feelings are quite sharp. Hee. Shangguan Yingying smiled and touched her head. The disciples of the outer palace have always been on their own. They would fight for their own interests. However, everyone is a real family after entering the inner palace. Although there are still some conflicts on weekdays, everyone has a common enemy, which is skeleton. In such a case, even the practitioners who fight to the death on weekdays will cooperate with each other in front of skeleton, so the conflicts will be reduced correspondingly. In front of the foreign race, we are all partners. You may not be able to understand this feeling now, but you will gradually understand when you become an inner hall disciple. Although Penglai Palace is divided into two halls, the real center has always been the inner hall. I see. Shangguan Yingying nodded. In fact, she already understood what Ren Zimei meant. You all sit down and rest first. Ren Ziheng saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were still standing and could not help but speak out. Although the frequency of skeleton appearing here is not high, it does not mean that they will never appear. These guys are all mysterious and can come out of the ground at any time. Moreover, they are very strong. Therefore, we think of ways to rest during the day in order to fully accumulate strength. As Ren Ziheng's voice fell, everyone also made room for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three sat down like everyone. The inner palace disciples were obviously not wary of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. After introducing the general situation to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, everyone began to talk about their own matters. In this regard, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three remained silent. They just quietly listened to everyone's conversation and learned more information from it. This is really a magical place. I am looking forward to the arrival of this night. I wonder what the fighting skeleton looks like. Shangguan Yingying's eyes flashed with excitement and curiosity. She was obviously full of anticipation. Chapter 34-20. Looking at Xiren and Shangguan Yingying's expectant faces, Di Beichen couldn't help but say, I'm afraid it won't be a good experience to wait for the skeletons to appear. Everyone is now hoping that the skeletons won't appear at night. From the crowd's discussion, he heard most of them praying that the skeletons wouldn't appear at night. Ren Ziheng and the others weren't weak. Although the other disciples were injured, they hadn't completely lost their fighting strength. However, under such circumstances, almost everyone was praying that the skeletons wouldn't appear. It was obvious how terrifying the skeletons were. Bailey Hongzhuang agreed with Di Beichen's words. Although I haven't seen the skeletons in battle, just by thinking about these dead things, we'll always be at a disadvantage if we fight them. They had flesh and blood, but the skeletons couldn't feel any pain. In other words, their fighting strength would decrease after a battle, but the skeletons' fighting strength wouldn't decrease at all. Moreover, there were only so many inner palace disciples, but the number of skeletons was astonishing. After all, we haven't seen them before. This is a rare opportunity. After we return, the next time we come will be when we become inner palace disciples. Xiren smiled faintly, his face still filled with interest. People would always be curious about things they hadn't seen before, even if they weren't good people. Shangguan Yingying nodded. It wasn't easy to become an inner palace disciple. Even if they had a certain level of confidence in themselves, their cultivation had to be at least at the 7th level of the Purple Realm before they could participate in the advancement test. Just this point alone required them to work hard for a long time. After hearing Xiren's words, Ren Ziheng couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. I hope you don't see the skeletons, because after seeing them once, you won't want to see them a second time. If that happens, you might not even have the thought of becoming an inner palace disciple. That's not a good thing. The skeletons are actually that terrifying. Xiren was slightly stunned, his face filled with disbelief. In his opinion, the skeletons were just another kind of special monster beast. The only difference was that the process of dealing with them was a little more disgusting than dealing with monsters. Other than that, the experience should be similar. Not bad. Ren Ziheng nodded. That's the existence of nightmares. Only dawn can bring us a glimmer of hope. The night is always the most terrifying. At this point, Ren Ziheng's gaze deepened a little. Staying in this training ground, almost everyone had a different kind of expectation towards dawn. Nighttime was when the gates to hell opened. After seeing Ren Ziheng's serious expression, Xiren's curiosity lessened a little because he could see that Ren Ziheng was trembling with disgust from the bottom of his heart when he mentioned the incubus. If one did not fear something to a certain extent, one would not reveal such emotions. He knew that Ren Ziheng was a cultivator at the 8th level of the Purple Realm, yet he was still so afraid of the skeleton. If they were in his shoes, the situation would be even worse. Chapter 34-21. After seeing the complicated look in Xiren's eyes, Ren Ziheng smiled again and said, You don't have to be too nervous. Generally speaking, we won't have a skeleton army here. If you want to really see it, you have to wait until you become an inner hall disciple. At that time, I'm afraid you have to see it. Senior brother Ren, have there been outer hall disciples coming here before? Di Beichen asked slowly. Since they had been tricked into coming here, it was likely that similar things had happened before. Perhaps there would be some daring masters who would deliberately come here to find out what was going on. Ren Ziheng nodded, there have been outer hall disciples coming here before. Although it is rare to see you being tricked like this, it has happened several times. This kind of thing can only happen to the disciples who have just joined the Penglai Palace. Other disciples have long known the difference between the two teleportation arrays and will not be tricked at all. However, there are not many people like you who have just arrived at the Penglai Palace and are hated by others. Listening to the laughter in Ren Ziheng's words, Di Beichen and the other three felt a burst of helplessness in their hearts. Ren Ziheng did not know the situation of the four of them in the outer hall. It could be assumed that everyone present in the outer hall did not make as much noise as them. Then did they leak the news later? Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but ask. This news really brought too much shock to everyone. Once it was spread, it would be really explosive news. She didn't believe that no one had spread it for so long. No. Ren Ziheng shook his head. At this time, Ren Zimei said another sentence, but it made the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three change. Because those guys were not lucky enough, they couldn't hold on until it was time to go back, so you four newcomers better pray that you don't encounter the skeleton army. Although we will find ways to protect you, many times we can't even take care of ourselves. You can understand by looking at everyone's injuries. Ren Zimei's face was solemn and serious. I'm not joking with you. In this place, the slightest carelessness can cost you your life. It's more tragic than any of the environments you've experienced before. Watching your family and friends fall and become a member of the skeleton army is something you can't imagine. Looking at Ren Zimei's serious expression, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's expressions turned serious. Ren Zimei's words were not meant to scare them. They were from the bottom of her heart. Just thinking about it was enough to know how terrible it felt to see one's family and friends turn into an army of skeletons. Zimei, there's no need to say too much now. Ren Ziheng waved his hand, indicating that Ren Zimei did not need to continue speaking. He turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three and said, "Curiosity killed the cat. So, you should stay here obediently. Do not run around, or else you will have to bear the consequences." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three nodded slightly. With just a few simple sentences, they already understood a lot of information. In short, this place was not a place that everyone liked to come to. Even if Ren Ziheng and the others understood this place very well, they were still filled with an indescribable sense of rejection and fear. Chapter 34-22. Before their strength reached a certain level, they would be asking for trouble if they went out rashly. This place is so terrifying. No cultivator has ever come out alive. No wonder Li Shengkai and the others were so confident. They must have thought that we would never be able to leave this place. Sheng Guanying's expression was ugly. Her eyes were filled with anger. Those damn bastards wanted to use this opportunity to keep them here forever. Senior brother Ren and senior sister Ren made it sound so serious. I'm afraid this is really a place of no return. That's why Li Shengkai and the others are willing to give it a try, Wen Ziren said slowly. Damn it. Sheng Guanying clenched her fists. As long as I can go back, I will definitely make those bastards pay. It's best if I throw them here to experience it. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. Their hearts were heavy. According to Ren Ziheng and the others' description, this place was simply like hell. There's still half a month before the next teleportation array opens. Whether we can survive this half a month is also a problem. Bailey Hongzhuang said in a low voice. She noticed that Ren Ziheng, who was at the 8th level of the Purple Realm, was also injured. She had fought with Gao Hanchun before, so she knew the strength of a 8th level Purple Realm cultivator. Ordinary monsters were no match for him, but these skeletons were able to injure Ren Ziheng. Just this point alone was enough to determine how powerful these skeletons were. Even though Ren Ziheng and the others kept saying that the frequency of skeletons appearing here was very low, she could see that everyone was not so sure. Most of them were praying. This proved that they were not absolutely safe here. It was just a little safer. If they were unlucky and encountered an army of skeletons, although there were many cultivators in front of them, they were afraid that they would not be able to fight. Otherwise, everyone would not be so nervous. Looking at the dignified appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang, Sheng Guanying's face could not help but show a touch of worry. Now she gradually felt a sense of crisis, and her eyes could not help but look up at the sky. It was already afternoon, and soon the night would gradually fall. Come to think of it, when night fell, everyone had to be vigilant against the skeletons that could appear at any time. At this time, the man who had said that he was often disliked came to Di Beichen's side with a curious look on his face. "Newcomer, what's your name?" Di Beichen looked at the newcomer in surprise and said, "My name is Di Beichen." "Oh." The man nodded. "My name is Chu Jinfeng." "So it's senior brother Chu." Chu Jinfeng waved his hand and said, "You don't have to be so polite. By the way, I heard that there are 4 cultivators in the outer palace that Master Long has taken a fancy to. Do you know about them?" As Chu Jinfeng's voice fell, many of the inner palace disciples' eyes flashed with curiosity. "We also heard about this news. Master Long is experienced and knowledgeable. His vision is also very high. I'm afraid the people that Master Long has taken a fancy to are not simple." Chapter 34-23. That's true. Master Long's demon pet egg isn't that easy to obtain. Unless you perform extremely well in the outer palace, or you perform extremely well in the advancement assessment, it's only possible. Otherwise, you have to achieve a certain result in this training ground before you can obtain a demon pet egg. My achievement points have always been saved up, in order to be able to exchange for a good demon pet egg. The 4 new guys actually got a demon pet egg as soon as they arrived. Speaking of which, it's really infuriating to compare people to death. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. Their eyes were filled with envy. Even the inner palace disciples couldn't help but be envious of the newcomers' treatment. I heard about it before. Originally, I wanted to see what kind of geniuses they were. However, they were always healing, so I couldn't see them. It's a pity. Chu Jinfeng sighed. Then, he looked at Di Beichen curiously. "Newcomer, you should have heard about this matter, right?" Listening to everyone's discussion about them, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3's expressions were somewhat complicated. They were already well-known figures in the outer palace. They didn't expect that many disciples in the inner palace would have heard of their existence. Di Beichen quietly glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2. The 3 of them shook their heads. It wasn't easy for them to not be ostracized here. If they spoke about this matter, wouldn't it cause trouble again? I heard about it. The commotion caused by this matter was extremely shocking. Di Beichen nodded. However, the 4 of them seemed to have been in seclusion in the house. There were no signs of them coming out. Although we were curious, we didn't have the chance to see them. Chu Jinfeng nodded. He wasn't surprised by Di Beichen's words at all. I heard that more than 200 disciples working together couldn't take the lives of the 4 of them. If this news spread, it would be a legendary existence. Not to mention the 100 or so disciples who died, the remaining few disciples must have hated them to a certain extent. It's normal for them to not be willing to come out. As long as it's not some guy who wants to see the world in chaos, they shouldn't choose to come out at this time. That's right, I heard that the surviving disciples of the outer hall experienced a decline in their cultivation. Do you know what happened to them? Chu Jinfeng sighed. I originally wanted to know more about the aftermath, but I was dragged here by Ren Ziheng and the others. I won't be able to return for a while. As outer hall disciples, you should know better. Seeing Chu Jinfeng's curious look, Ren Ziheng felt a little helpless. You don't have to care about him. This guy is obviously a man, but he likes to gossip so much. You make it sound like you're not curious. Chu Jinfeng curled his lips. Our Penglai Palace has not had such an interesting thing happen in a long time. Of course, we have to understand it. I feel that those fellows might become our inner palace disciples very soon. It's not a bad thing to get to know them in advance. A faint smile appeared on Renzime's face. Speaking of which, I'm also a little curious about this matter. If you know anything, please tell us. Chapter 34-24. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at each other and felt a little awkward. They never thought that the inner palace disciples would be so curious about them. However, they did not know how Ren Ziheng and the others would react, and they found out that the 4 cultivators they were interested in were right in front of them. It said that those disciples can't recover their strength. They can only cultivate again, Di Beichen said slowly. Chu Jinfeng and the others sighed when they heard that. I've already guessed that this would happen. Since those 4 newcomers could cause such a huge commotion, they must have quite a temper. Being attacked by over 200 cultivators, anyone would probably die of frustration. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to help them recover their cultivation. These 4 newcomers seem to have quite the character. Haha. Ren Ziheng and the others also nodded. This kind of result was really not unexpected. As long as we can return safely this time, I'll go to the outer palace to meet those 4 newcomers. The outer palace is not suitable for them. It's better for them to come to the inner palace as soon as possible. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 smiled faintly. They only felt curiosity from Chu Jinfeng and the others' conversation. They did not feel any rejection or hostility. They only hoped that this would continue in the future. At this moment, Chu Jinfeng looked at the wound on his arm and could not help but curse. These skeletons are more than a little annoying. It's just a normal wound, but the recovery speed is so slow. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the wound on Chu Jinfeng's left arm with her sharp eyes. Her eyes instantly widened as shock filled them. She saw that the wound was very deep. It reached the bone and revealed fresh red flesh. She could even vaguely see some white bones. Most importantly, there was a faint black color at the edge of the wound. According to her judgment, Chu Jinfeng had already used healing medicine. However, there were no signs of recovery after so long. It was very strange. Senior Chu, can I see your wound? Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but ask. Hearing this, Chu Jinfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. Obviously, he did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to make such a request. I feel like your wound is different from the ones we usually get. It hasn't healed after so long. Is there a problem? Bailey Hongzhuang explained. I didn't expect junior sister's eyes to be so sharp. You actually saw through the problem with a single glance. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's explanation, Chu Jinfeng chuckled. This wound is indeed difficult to heal. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately walked to Chu Jinfeng's side and carefully looked at Chu Jinfeng's wound. Her discovery was even more obvious. That layer of faint black gas was still preventing the wound from healing. Even if no healing medicine was used, the wound would not show signs of healing after such a long time. From this, it could be seen that there was a problem. While Bailey Hongzhuang was paying attention to the wound, Di Beichen, Wen Ziren and Shengguan Yingying were also surrounding the wound. They were all curious about this problem. This wound was left by the skeletons? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Chu Jinfeng nodded, that's right. This is also one of the disgusting methods of these skeletons. As long as one is injured by these skeletons, the edge of the wound will be contaminated with this kind of black gas and will not heal for a long time. Chapter 34-25. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, the shock in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes deepened. I didn't think that the skeleton's attacks would have such a characteristic. No wonder everyone's injuries are so severe. Indeed, if it weren't for the fact that our injuries wouldn't heal, we wouldn't be in such a situation. A trace of helplessness appeared on Renzime's face. However, regarding this, the doctors of Penglai Palace have already tried their best, but in the end, there has been no improvement. I wonder if the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate know how to solve this problem. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. The 100 Flowers Gate's position on Penglai Island was extraordinary. It could be said that there were the most excellent pharmacists and doctors gathered there. Chu Jinfeng shook his head. This problem is also a headache for the 100 Flowers Gate. In fact, although the three factions normally work together, they are very united in dealing with the skeletons. The 100 Flowers Gate has always been researching how to deal with the existence of the black gas, but after so long, there has been no effect. I didn't think it would be so troublesome. Even the 100 Flowers Gate can't do anything. Shangguan Yingying frowned. This kind of situation that hindered the healing of injuries was too troublesome. Bailey Hongzhuang's mind was filled with thousands of thoughts. She said in a deep voice, "So, if a cultivator is seriously injured, the injury that can be treated is very likely to be blocked by the black qi and cannot be healed. In the end, they can only lose their life." How do you know? Ren Ziheng was somewhat surprised. Normal people only knew that injuries were difficult to heal and didn't think of the various problems that would follow. He didn't think that Bailey Hongzhuang had thought of all of this. Seeing Ren Ziheng's curious expression, Di Beichen couldn't help but explain, "Hongzhuang is a doctor, so she is more familiar with this situation." Following Di Beichen's words, everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a trace of surprise. I really couldn't tell that Junior Bailey was a doctor. Chu Jinfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. After sizing her up, he smiled and said, "But after hearing what you said, I really feel that you do have the temperament of a doctor." Ren Ziheng and the others nodded. Generally speaking, most doctors would join the 100 Flowers Gate. Very few doctors would join Penglai Island. This was because doctors mainly developed their medical skills, not their strength. In this kind of situation, compared to a group of cultivators who only focused on cultivation, doctors would obviously be at a disadvantage in terms of combat strength. Therefore, the doctors that everyone saw on Penglai Island would never participate in battles. They didn't expect that a doctor would appear in their training team. It was really interesting. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "I've only dabbled in it a little." Hearing this, Ren Ziheng and the others also revealed a smile. That was more like it. If Bailey Hongzhuang really had amazing attainments in this area, then they would be truly shocked. You've tried many methods, but no matter what method you used, it was all useless for this injury. Bailey Hongzhuang slightly raised her eyebrows. Her eyes rippled with deep thought. This power of darkness was really strange. She had never come into contact with it before, so she couldn't make a judgment. Chapter 34-26. It's basically useless. Ren Ziheng saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was very concerned about the condition of the injury. He only thought that the doctor would have a certain curiosity about the situation that she had never seen before. He didn't mind introducing it to Bailey Hongzhuang. However, a kind of healing medicine made by the magic refining tower has some ways to treat this wound. At least the healing speed is a bit faster than ordinary healing medicine. Although it can't heal as quickly as ordinary wounds, it's much better than other healing medicines. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. The other three also looked at each other. If they didn't judge wrongly, the healing medicine that Ren Ziheng mentioned should be the healing medicine made by Bailey Hongzhuang. Previously, they had sold the prescription of this healing medicine to Steward Qin in exchange for the Purple Dragon Emperor Ginseng. Steward Qin had used this prescription to make a profit, but he did not expect to hear about this healing medicine from the mouths of others. Are you still in this situation after using that healing medicine? Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but ask. She was very familiar with the effect of the healing medicine she made. Its healing speed would be much faster than ordinary healing medicine. However, Chu Jinfeng's healing speed was so slow. If he had already used her healing medicine, then the destructive power of this black gas was a bit too terrifying. That's not it. Chu Jinfeng waved his hand. That healing medicine is a hot seller in Penglai Palace. It's not easy to get it on normal days. The healing medicine that I snatched before has been used up. Now I'm only using ordinary healing medicine. It's strange to say that it's all healing medicine. Even if the effect is better, it shouldn't be so obvious. However, the healing medicine of the magic refining tower is much better than ordinary healing medicine in restraining this black gas. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. Most of the ingredients of the healing medicine were similar. If the healing medicine she refined had an excellent effect, then some of the ingredients must have a suppressive effect on this black gas. In just a short moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's mind flashed with various elements, and she already had a certain idea in her heart. Speaking of which, I don't know how the Demon Training Tower came up with the prescription for this healing medicine. Now, both our Penglai Palace and the Crimson Moon sect are trying to buy it from them. However, this price is really expensive. Chu Jinfeng sighed. Ren Ziheng couldn't help but chuckle. Compared to us, the 100 Flowers Gate is even more anxious. The 100 Flower Gate had been trying to figure out a way to deal with the black gas, but they hadn't been able to come up with anything. Instead, the healing medicine from the demonic refining tower was effective. Previously, 100 Flowers Gate had been in an awkward position because of this matter. Huh, that's true. Everyone present could not help but laugh softly. The devil refining tower was usually an existence that did not make a sound. However, no one dared to underestimate the strength of the devil refining tower. However, the 100 Flowers Gate had always boasted of being powerful. Who would have thought that they would be slapped in the face by the devil refining tower? Shang Guaningyang and the others looked at each other. They really didn't think that the healing medicine that Bailey Hongzhuang had taken out would make the Mo refining pagoda famous. It seems like this business deal, Steward Qin had made a big profit. Chapter 34-27. Senior Brother Chu, are you talking about the healing medicine that was promoted by the Magic Tower a few months ago? That's right. Chu Jinfeng nodded. It seems like you guys have heard of it before. However, that healing medicine is indeed in high demand on Penglai Island. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately took out the healing medicine from her bosom and said, coincidentally, I also have this healing medicine here. Since this healing medicine can help with everyone's injuries, then everyone should use it first. In the next second, Bailey Hongzhuang took out 20 portions of healing medicine from her Qiankuan bag and gave one to each of the disciples present. She also felt that this healing medicine was very effective, so she made a lot of it and kept it with her. When going out to train, there might not be many serious injuries, but it was inevitable that there would be external injuries. When everyone saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, they could not help but be stunned. For a moment, they seemed to be unable to regain their senses. This scene was clearly out of Chu Jinfeng's expectations. He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise and said, your healing medicine is the healing medicine from the Magic Tower. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded, it should be. When these words came out, Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei could not help but look at each other. They were somewhat in disbelief. This new junior sister was a little too generous, wasn't she? Junior sister Bailey, this healing medicine is not cheap. Furthermore, there is a price but there is no market. It is not easy to get a few portions and you are giving it to us just like that. Chu Jinfeng could not help but be speechless. Although he had always been a reckless person, but he really could not do something like taking advantage of others. It was not only Chu Jinfeng, the other disciples present also did not take out any healing medicine. The new junior sister did not understand the market well enough and was so generous. If they took advantage of her like that, it would be very embarrassing. Although they really needed the healing medicine now. That's right, the time is not early anymore. It will not be long before it is night time. Although this medicine can't heal everyone's injuries immediately, it's still good to be able to speed things up a little. It'll also be safer at night. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at the crowd, and after seeing the complicated look on everyone's face, she understood what they were thinking and immediately began to explain. The four of us are newcomers to the Penglai Palace. We came here by accident. Fortunately, our senior brothers and sisters did not mind and told us a lot of things. I'm afraid we'll have to keep bothering you for the next 10 days. Compared to your friendliness, this is really nothing. The four of us aren't strong. If the skeleton army appears, not only will we not be able to help, we will also be a burden to everyone. So, senior brothers and sisters, don't worry about anything else. This is the only thing we can do right now. At this moment, Di Beichen's voice sounded. After seeing the sincere eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, Ren Ziheng and others were silent for a moment, then they all showed a smile on their faces. Junior brother and junior sister, I was wondering why I felt that you guys were very compatible when I saw you guys. You guys are really to my liking, Chu Jinfeng laughed loudly, since you guys said so, then I won't be polite. Don't worry, if you encounter danger, I will never ignore your safety. Chapter 34-28. Thank you, senior brother. Di Beichen cupped his hands and said. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with a faint smile. The cost of making these healing medicines was not high. With everyone's help, her speed of making them was extremely fast. It didn't take much effort at all. At this moment, she took out the healing medicine. First, it was because everyone's attitude towards them was very friendly. Second, it was because they were now a team. If everyone's injuries could be healed, then once they encountered the skeleton army, at least their fighting strength would increase by a bit. Of course, there was another reason. She wanted to see how much better the healing medicine she made was than the general healing medicine. Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain curiosity about all the diseases that she had never seen before. She had a faint hunch that in the future, she would inevitably have an intersection with this skeleton army. If this injury could be reversed, it would be a good thing for them. Chu Jinfeng sprinkled the healing medicine on his injured arm. As the healing medicine was sprinkled, he quietly frowned, but he didn't say anything. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were always locked on Chu Jinfeng's wound. She found that after the healing medicine was sprinkled, the black gas around the wound quietly faded a little. Although it couldn't completely dissipate the black gas, the reduction of the black gas proved that the effect of inhibiting the healing of the wound was weakened. It was precisely because of this that the speed of recovery of the injury was faster. After Chu Jinfeng saw the change in the wound, the smile on his face couldn't help but widen a little. It is indeed this healing medicine. I didn't expect junior sister to have a lot of it. This thing is very popular in the Penglai Palace. Where did you buy it? As soon as these words came out, everyone also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with some curiosity. Although the amount of healing medicine made by the magic refining tower was not small, there were also many practitioners on the Penglai Island who needed it. Their Penglai Palace could be considered one of the big families. However, everyone still had to rely on robbing. If they were late, they would have nothing left. Before I joined the Penglai Palace, I stayed in the magic tower for a while. At that time, the healing medicine was not as popular as it is now. The price was not high. I thought the effect was good, so I bought a lot. Bailey Hongzhuang said. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone understood. So that's how it is. I've also heard that this healing medicine is relatively easy to buy in the magic refining tower. However, we simply don't have the time to go to the magic refining tower. What a pity. Chu Jinfeng sighed, junior sister, you can be considered smart. Now, the price of healing medicine has increased by several times. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and took it as a tacit agreement. After everyone used Bailey Hongzhuang's healing medicine, the recovery speed of the injury was faintly faster. At the same time, everyone was more friendly to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. This was how people got along with each other in this world. When someone took the initiative to show goodwill, everyone's relationship became closer and closer. Hongzhuang, I really didn't expect your healing medicine to have such a good effect. No wonder Steward Qin wanted to do business with you. Just from the previous transaction, he has already made a lot of money. Chapter 34-29. When Xiren nodded, Steward Qin is really making a fortune in silence. All the major powers are buying healing medicine from him. Just thinking about it, the amount is astonishing. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Steward Qin has indeed made a lot of money through this healing medicine, but to me, these are not as important as the Purple Dragon Emperor Ginseng. Perhaps in the eyes of others, she had made a loss, but to her, this deal was definitely worth it. As long as Di Beichen could be safe and sound, not to mention a healing medicine formula, even if it was anything else, she was willing to do it. Di Beichen turned his gaze away, his eyes full of gentleness and affection. He chuckled and said, "My wife has a deep affection for me, I can only repay it with my entire life." Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Di Beichen. That's right, you might not be able to repay it in your entire life. Isn't that just right? I wish to be with my wife for the rest of my life. When Xiren and Shangguan Yingying looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's sweet appearance and couldn't help but tremble. They just wanted to shake off all the goosebumps on their bodies. You two are already an old couple, why are you still so mushy? Di Beichen glanced at Di Beichen and shook his head. You and Yingying are called an old couple. My wife and I are newlyweds. When the last ray of light disappeared and the curtain of night slowly fell, Ren Ziheng and the others all had a serious expression on their faces. Their attention had been focused on their surroundings and even their feet. Sometimes, these skeleton armies will suddenly emerge from the ground, and if you are caught off guard, you will be pulled down directly. They might even break your legs, so everyone will be alert and pay attention to everything at night. After all, if you are not careful, you will lose your life. You have to be careful. Ren Ziheng reminded. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three also stood up and carefully observed their surroundings. Even though it was their first time spending the night here, after seeing how cautious everyone was, they naturally paid attention to their surroundings like everyone else. The night was deep, and the surroundings were quiet. Not a single sound could be heard. However, no one present relaxed because of this silence. They had stayed here for too long, and they never thought that they could get away with this temporary peace, because this moment of luck could lead to their death in the next moment. Master, I didn't expect everyone to be so nervous. Xiao He sat on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder and could not help but look around. Just the atmosphere of the crowd made her feel a little heavy. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. These skeletons shouldn't be simple, and the way they appear is unpredictable, so it's only right to be on guard. When she thought of the skeleton army suddenly emerging from the ground, Bailey Hongzhuang felt her scalp go numb. This feeling of appearing and disappearing unpredictably was the most difficult to grasp. As long as they were not careful, it would not be easy for them to get up again. Is the situation of them suddenly emerging from the ground very similar to what we encountered in the desert world? Xiao Bai could not help but ask. Chapter 34:30. In that case, the benefits of our experience in the desert world are really not small. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly, her bright phoenix eyes twinkled with a little bit of starlight, and looked at Di Beichen with a smile. Indeed, every kind of experience in the desert world is very beneficial to us. Di Beichen smiled faintly, thinking back to the time when they were just in the desert world. They were often caught off guard by the sneak attacks of the demon beasts, but later on, their perception and judgment continued to improve. Even if the demon beasts were still elusive, they could already perceive them in advance. It was precisely because of this that the probability of being sneak attacked by the demon beasts continued to decrease, and the danger also continued to decrease. This kind of growth, thinking about it, would be a great help in this place where the skeletons were everywhere. Before, when they were in the desert world, they didn't feel that it would be particularly helpful, but according to the environment in front of them, it was really a great help. Many times you think that the things you have mastered are not very useful, but you don't know when it may be of great use. In this kind of cautious situation, time undoubtedly passed very slowly, and being on guard against the possible appearance of the skeleton army at any time, it was inevitable that people would feel worried. And in this incomparably quiet time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others seemed to be able to faintly hear the sound of fighting coming from the distance. At their level of cultivation, whether it was eyesight or hearing, they were far superior to ordinary people. Just by listening to the faint sound of fighting, they could imagine how fierce the battle in the distance was. Ren Ziheng and the others naturally also heard the rustling sound, and couldn't help but frown tightly. The skeleton army has already appeared over there. Looking at the situation, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to deal with. Thinking of this, Ren Ziheng wanted to set out to help. Seeing Ren Ziheng's almost subconscious action, Ren Zimei couldn't help but say, "Big brother, don't think about helping, our mission this time is to take care of the injured disciples. Now that everyone is injured, it is naturally the best that there is no skeleton army here for the time being. If you leave, if something happens here, how are you going to explain it?" Hearing this, Ren Ziheng sighed. In the end, he dismissed the thought in his heart. Not only Ren Ziheng, but Chu Jinfeng and the other disciples also had expressions of unwillingness on their faces. If not for the fact that they were injured and their fighting strength had greatly decreased, they would not have stayed here. However, if they went in their current state, they would only be giving up their lives. Right now, as long as I see these skeletons, I wish I could kill them all. Even after they died, they still come out to cause trouble. It's really disgusting. Chu Jinfeng said angrily. After staying here for a long time, he had developed an instinctive hatred for the skeleton army. Just by looking at them, he could not help but destroy them all. Everyone sighed deeply as they nodded their heads. Their eyes were filled with disgust towards the skeleton army. Who knew how many cultivators would be injured during this night? After this night, I'm afraid our team will grow a little stronger tomorrow. Ren Zimei sighed faintly. It was one thing for those inanimate creatures to die, but seeing her companions injured like this, she didn't feel too good. Chapter 34-31. The night passed slowly under everyone's vigilance. Until a trace of light appeared on the horizon, Ren Ziheng and the others breathed a sigh of relief and sat on the ground in relief. Although they wanted to fight with the skeleton army wholeheartedly, the disciples here were all injured, so it was best if the skeleton army did not appear. It's daybreak, the skeleton army will not appear, you can also rest for a while. Ren Zimei said to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also sat on the ground. Although they did not engage in any battle for the whole night, they had been mentally tense for the whole night, so there was a certain amount of exhaustion. My God, every night has to be spent like this, it's really not an ordinary exhaustion. Sheng Guanying couldn't help but sigh. Even if they were facing monsters, they didn't need to be so cautious to this extent. Since we have already come to this place, then let's stay here at ease. The earlier we understand, the more mentally prepared we will be when we become inner hall disciples in the future. Xiren said with a chuckle. Shangwan Yingying nodded. Even if nothing happened for the whole night, this feeling of being ready for battle made her feel a burst of helplessness. Even when they were chased by Gao Hanchun before, they were not so nervous. She was really curious about the situation when the skeleton army appeared. After everyone breathed a sigh of relief, they began to cultivate by themselves. In this place, as long as the sky was bright, it meant that there would be no more danger, everyone could relax and cultivate. Because during the day, they would only encounter disciples of the same sect, and in such a place, there would be no conflict at all between disciples of the same sect. Bailey Hongzhuang checked Chu Jinfeng's wound again and found that the black qi on the wound had quietly dissipated a little. The wound that was originally deep enough to see the bone had healed a lot, but it would take 2 days to completely heal. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang also understood a little more in her heart. If it was an ordinary injury, as long as the healing medicine was used, the practitioner's movement would not be affected for a day. On the other hand, the injuries left behind by the skeleton needed 3 days to heal, and the gap between the two was apparent. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was extremely interested in the recovery of this injury, Chu Jinfeng couldn't help but smile and say, "Junior Bailey, it seems that you are also very interested in this medical skill." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "I've never seen such an injury before. I'm very curious." Anyone who knows medicine would be very curious when they see this kind of injury for the first time. Chu Jinfeng chuckled, "If junior sister Bailey can come up with a cure, that would be amazing. If I want to cure this injury, I have to find a way to break this black gas." However, I don't have any clues right now. Bailey Hongzhuang furrowed her brows as she pondered. This injury was just an ordinary injury, the only difference was the black gas. If she could find something to get rid of this black gas, then this problem would naturally be solved. However, this black gas seemed to be a very special existence. To get rid of this black gas, she really couldn't think of anything. Chapter 34-32. Bailey Hongzhuang only dabbled in medicine a little. It must be known that the existence of this black qi had made the 100 Flowers Gate's many alchemists and doctors difficult to deal with. The pharmacists and doctors of the 100 Flowers Gate were all focused on this area. Even they had no other way. Bailey Hongzhuang was actually so serious in researching a way to break it. She was overestimating herself. However, seeing Bailey Hongzhuang so serious in her thoughts, Chu Jinfeng couldn't bear to discourage her. Since Bailey Hongzhuang was so interested in the black gas, he would let her slowly research it. After all, they had nothing else to do here. Of course, if Chu Jinfeng knew that the healing medicine that he highly praised was made by Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him, he would never have such thoughts again. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the black gas lingering around the wound and thought of a way to break it. All kinds of medicinal ingredients flashed through her mind, but she dismissed them in the end. However, she had a few guesses in her mind. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughtful expression and couldn't help but ask, "Wife, have you thought of a way to break this black gas?" Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head, "No. Even now, I still don't understand the black gas well enough. As for a way to break it, I don't even know." Even though she was very confident in her medical skills, but the entire Penglai Island had so many pharmacists and doctors who couldn't think of a solution. If she could think of a solution in such a short time, it would be too inconceivable. She didn't understand the true strength of the 100 Flowers Gate, but as a famous power, they must have real strength. She definitely wouldn't underestimate them. Since they couldn't think of a way to break it after so long, it proved that it was extremely difficult. However, your medicine seems to have some special suppressive effect on the black gas? Di Beichen asked. Just this point alone made Bailey Hongzhuang better than those doctors and pharmacists. That's right. That's why I have some guesses in my mind. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. However, if my judgment is correct, even if my conjectures can suppress the black gas to a certain extent, it's still impossible to completely eliminate it. She had already carefully studied the characteristics of her healing medicine. Although it had some suppressive effects, it could only suppress it. It could be said that it treated the symptoms but not the root cause. If she wanted to truly remove this black gas, it was obvious that she still couldn't find the thing that could truly counter it. Is it possible that there is no way to break this black gas? Sheng Guaningying couldn't help but ask. Nowadays, she was very interested in the art of poison. Medicine and poison were inseparable. Therefore, when Bailey Hongzhuang mentioned this point, she also seemed to be very interested. Hearing his words, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head and said in a deep voice, "Everything in the world has its own antidote, just as no matter what kind of poison it is, you can find the antidote. The problem is whether you can find the antidote or not. Since this black gas exists, it means that there must be something that counters this black gas. However, there are millions of things in the world. Finding this thing isn't easy." Every time she encountered a new illness, Bailey Hongzhuang would spend a lot of time thinking about it. It was all for the sake of finding this substance. Chapter 34-33. Only by understanding enough medicinal herbs would one be able to find the corresponding substance in the shortest time possible. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had never seen this black gas before. She didn't even understand its characteristics, let alone something that countered it. The only thing she could do now was to understand it in advance. If she could make some progress, it would be for the best. That way, they would have more ways to deal with it when they came here to train as inner disciples. So that's how it is. Sheng Guaningying's face flashed with understanding. I feel that the world of medicine is also very magical. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. There are many things that exist in this world that are very magical. Back then, I was very interested in this mutual generation and restraint, so I put a lot of effort into my medical skills. Just as Ren Ziheng had expected, a few more cultivators who were seriously injured came over one after another today. Just by looking at the injured cultivators, Bailey Hongzhuang could feel how tragic the battle last night was. The seriously injured cultivators even had their legs broken. Most importantly, from the part of the wound, it seemed that they were torn apart. Sheng Guaningying couldn't help but frown after seeing this scene. The feeling of having one's leg broken was enough to make her scalp tingle. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen couldn't help but look at each other. It seems that this skeleton is very strong. I'm afraid that he was caught off guard and was very strong. Before the cultivator could react, his leg had already been broken. Di Beichen said in a deep voice. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She finally understood why Ren Ziheng and the others were so careful last night. Being caught off guard was probably the most difficult thing to accept. What a terrible injury. Sheng Guaningying looked at the injuries and couldn't help but shiver. Although they would also get injured in battle, but compared to this kind of injury, the injuries left by swords and sabers were obviously much easier to accept. Ren Ziheng and the rest immediately went to help the injured cultivators over. Everyone's expression revealed some helplessness and heaviness. However, it was fortunate that their lives were not harmed. As long as they consumed some medicinal pills that could regenerate broken bones, they would still be able to recover. However, they would need to recuperate for quite some time after returning this time. The cultivator with the broken leg seemed to be used to this. He even had a smile on his face. Ren Ziheng, I didn't expect us to meet so soon. Ren Ziheng looked at the man helplessly. Jing Tianlang, it seems that you were very unlucky last night. Don't mention it. Jing Tianlang waved his hand, his face full of annoyance. Those skeletons are getting more and more despicable. Their sneak attacks are hard to guard against. I'm really unlucky this time. Since you're already here, you should rest well. Ren Ziheng sighed. Looking at your situation, I'm afraid that you'll need to recuperate for at least a month when we return this time. That depends on the situation. You guys were pretty lucky last night. You didn't encounter those annoying guys. Jing Tianlang looked at the people around him who were safe and sound and smiled. Chapter 34-34. Jing Tianlang sat down at the side as if he was very familiar with the disciples around him. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but look at each other. Compared to the outer palace disciples who did not know each other, the inner palace disciples were obviously much more familiar with each other and clearly knew each other. Jing Tianlang quickly noticed the unfamiliar faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, and his eyes couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. When did we add a few new disciples to the inner hall? Then why are they staying here? Why don't they go to the front? The four of them are new outer palace disciples. They were tricked by someone and went to the wrong teleportation formation and accidentally came here, Chu Jinfeng explained with a smile. Every time he thought about how Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were tricked by someone, he found it funny. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, Jing Tianlang could not help but be stunned. Outer palace disciples. Ren Zimei nodded, these four are hotheads. I'm afraid they don't know the twists and turns of the outer palace. Someone deliberately tricked them and they came here. Now they can't leave and can only stay here. As soon as she said that, Jing Tianlang could not help but laugh. You four newcomers are quite interesting. When we get back, we must teach those people who tricked you a lesson. They clearly want you to die here. Any cultivator who had stayed in the outer palace for a period of time would know how terrifying the training grounds of the inner palace disciples were. If one was not strong enough, only death would await them. However, those people deliberately tricked Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to come here. It was obvious that they wanted to kill them. As long as we go back, those people will definitely have a hard time, Di Baichen slowly said as his deep eyes flickered with a sharp light. He did not need to think to know that those people were determined that they would not be able to return alive. When they returned alive, he would personally send them to hell. As for Li Shengkai, the little bit of friendship they had before was completely gone after this incident. Since they wanted to kill them, only one of them could survive. Hearing the murderous intent in Di Baichen's words, Jing Tianlang was a little surprised. He did not expect this new disciple to be so confident. It was as if he wanted to kill them when they returned. With this kind of temperament, if he had the strength, it would be confidence. If he did not have enough strength, it would be arrogance. However, Jing Tianlang took a deep look at Di Baichen. He felt that Di Baichen was showing confidence. I admire such a vengeful personality. I hope you can return alive and give them a surprise. We will. Di Baichen. Although this training ground was full of danger, he never thought that they would lose their lives here. Seeing Di Baichen's confidence, Jing Tianlang raised his eyebrows and looked at Ren Ziheng and the others thoughtfully. Ren Ziheng and the others also smiled faintly. They could all see that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were not ordinary people. As long as they were geniuses, they would always have some pride. In the next few days, everyone's luck was extremely good. They passed the night peacefully and did not encounter the skeleton army. Chapter 34-35. With the continuous addition of injured disciples, the team of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others was also constantly growing. From the initial 20 people, it had become a team of 40 people. Some of the cultivators who were not seriously injured left directly after recuperating here for a few days. Obviously, they did not intend to wait for the teleportation formation to open this time. As for some of the more seriously injured cultivators, they could only stay here and wait to go back and recuperate. During this process, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also understood that the disciples of the inner hall of Penglai Palace had their own arrangements before each experiential learning. This time, it happened to be Ren Ziheng and Ren Zimei's turn to take care of the injured disciples. Next time, it would be other cultivators' turn. Because the injured disciples' combat power was weaker, if there was no one to protect them, once they encountered the skeleton army, only death would await them. The number of cultivators in the inner hall was not many. Compared to the skeleton army here, it was already very small. If there were still such a large number of casualties, then it would not be long before there would not be many cultivators left in the inner hall of Penglai Palace. Among these injured cultivators, there were also some people who were seriously injured. After seeing these seriously injured cultivators, Bailey Hongzhuang went to help without saying a word. If it was a normal day, the injuries of others had nothing to do with her at all. Bailey Hongzhuang also had no intention to help. However, now everyone was fighting against the skeleton army that threatened the Xingxian continent. In this regard, they should have been allies. What's more, after seeing the inner hall disciples helping each other, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were also deeply affected by this atmosphere. As an individual, the influence of this atmosphere was often huge. In such an atmosphere, everyone was willing to think for each other. Everyone originally had some doubts about Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills, but after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's skillful technique, everyone's heart also surged with some feelings of appreciation. They were often injured, so they had a certain understanding of how to deal with injuries. However, it was much more convenient for Bailey Hongzhuang to deal with it. During this process, Bailey Hongzhuang did not hesitate to use her healing medicine. Therefore, everyone accepted Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three from the bottom of their hearts. They only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could pass the advancement test as soon as possible and become a member of their team. Junior brother D, your luck is really not bad. Junior sister Bailey has already been deceived by you at such a young age. If you hadn't acted early, I can guarantee that you would definitely have many love rivals in the inner palace. Chu Jinfeng patted Di Beichen's shoulder. His eyes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang, who was treating his injuries not far away. Not only was Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance outstanding, but she was also very easy to get along with. She did not have the affectation of an ordinary woman. She was simply every man's dream lover. According to their judgment during this period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were also very outstanding. At the very least, she was not inferior to the doctors they usually see. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, Di Beichen could not help but smile. I won't hide it from senior brother Chu. Actually, I also think that my luck is very good. To be able to meet Bailey Hongzhuang was the luckiest thing in his life. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.